Camilla tossed and turned in her bunk bed, the tendrils of anxiety from her dream still clinging to her like static. She could feel it lingering. That peculiar mix of mischief and dread that only childhood memories seemed able to conjure. Even half awake, the scent of old fabric and hidden corners hovered at the edge of her senses, as if the dream refused to let go just yet. In the dream, she was 4 again, mischievous, curious, forever 2 steps away from trouble. She'd slipped into the closet, her favorite gateway to forbidden treasures tucked deep in the eaves of their home. Coats were too big for her shoulders, shoes swallowed her feet whole, yet she strutted proudly in her mother's heels and Aunt Clarice's fur collars, queen of a cardboard castle. Every forgotten scrap, a scarf, a swatch of fabric, a tablecloth no one used, became a jewel or a weapon in her private empire. She never paused to consider that one day she would be expected to carry responsibilities just as oversized. Eventually, when the excitement waned and weariness returned, she tossed everything back in a hurry, blissfully unaware of the chaos she'd created. "Camilla!" her mum shouted. She had planned to fix it later, of course, but her mother, as always, assumed mischief for mischief's sake. She woke to the drone of recycled air, the corridor outside her bunk humming with fluorescent sterility. The robo-cleaners had erased every trace of dust, every sign of human mess, as if even chaos wasn't allowed here. After the warmth of her dream, the ship's halls felt like punishment, a jail made of polished white. Camilla rolled herself out of the bed. She really didn't want her mother yelling at her in her dreams. Camilla's mother, just like the generations before her, had lived outside of the ship. It had been one of the most important directives of Prophet Sans, living on the planet in order to learn to become one with it, to tie themselves to it as much as possible. Of course, they had changed the look of this valley to look a bit more like Earth, but spending most time outdoors was an important step of survival to acclimatize and integrate with this ecosystem mentally, emotionally, and most importantly, energetically.
"One day people will come,"
Mum had said.
"It might not be in my time, nor in yours, but it's the duty of our lineage to keep this knowledge alive."
And so, the fateful day arrived. Camilla was merely 10 years old when Dinuk's family crash-landed on the planet, pursued by pirates. That day marked a profound shift in her life. However, despite Camilla's anticipation of finally making contact with outsiders, her mother chose a different path. Rather than reaching out, she made a decisive move, burning their family home, erasing all traces of their lineage from the valley, and relocating Camilla and herself to the concealed ship nestled within the mountain range. Camilla became intimately acquainted with the vessel that became her new home. She learned of its necessity for human presence, as envisioned by the shipbuilders, her ancestors. Their foresight painted a picture of humanity's eventual return to space travel, with their planet as a pivotal destination. The ship, once a relic of prophecy, held the promise of being a vital asset when that time came. Yawning, Camilla felt the lingering presence of her mother long after she had woken and explored the ship. With her mother's passing, Camilla bore the weight of their shared responsibilities. Promising to honor her mother's legacy and the ship's role in humanity's future, she understood that her own offspring would soon enter the equation. When the pirates arrived, the valley grew its first scars. They weren't tyrants with whips. They didn't need to be. They had food, and food was law. Work in the mines and you ate. Work harder, and you could afford a blanket, a tool, a candle stub. Don't work, and you starved. Tokens passed from hand to hand, soon becoming a shadow currency. Some miners grew rich in scraps, others fell into debt. Hierarchies formed, little kings of hunger, shaping the first rough outlines of what would one day be towns and cities. The pirates watched from orbit, amused. Order, without the trouble of chains. From her seat in the ship's control room, Camila watched it all unfold across the glow of the surveillance screens. She could hear the miners argue, trade, and sometimes laugh, despite everything. She longed to step into their world, to test her mother's iron law of observe, don't interfere. Yet every time she packed her bag to slip away, she remembered the shimmer of the security net above, the invisible cage in the sky. Even dreams had chains here. The pirate settlement had become a permanent fixture once they unearthed valuable metals to mine, and since then, Camila found herself increasingly preoccupied with monitoring their activities. Her mother had warned that these were not the type of people fit to board their ship. At first, Camila had harbored hopes of proving her mother wrong, even going as far as running away once in defiance. However, as time passed, she reluctantly came to agree with her mother's assessment. The pirates were ruthless and indifferent, exploiting slaves to carry out their labor. In recent days, a sickness had begun to spread among the slaves, prompting Camilla's keen interest in whether a cure had been found. As she awaited updates, the first image flickered onto the screen. The doctor's office.
Is not what you wanted to hear.
The doctor's voice resonated from the speakers.
But the good news is it's not the dog flu either.
The patient opposite the doctor remained silent, his expression darkening as he grappled with the consequences of his condition. It became apparent that his loss of a leg and kidney was attributed to a mushroom he had consumed. Impatient for answers, Camila longed to intervene. However, the limitations of distant surveillance restricted her to observing and waiting for information to be shared. She couldn't access files or engage in conversation directly. Instead, she had to rely on the doctor divulging details to someone else. The rigid setup of the surveillance system prevented her from following the doctor as he left the office, forcing her to choose her surveillance points carefully. Camila's ship carried something no other vessel in possessed, a miniature loom core. Where the grand cradles Alan left behind were monumental stations, this was a prototype, a family heirloom passed down through her lineage. The device could open a thread of connection through subspace, a phenomenon Prophet Sands had likened to the eye of a needle. Through that impossibly narrow channel, Camila could push miniature crystalline lenses, each one tuned to resonate with the bubble's fabric. When they emerged on the other side, these lenses behaved like scouts, catching fragments of light, sound, and transmission, then feeding them back through the thread. It was not without risk. The line was fragile. Push too much data, and the thread snapped back with violent feedback, frying systems, or the operator. Hold it too long, and the enemy might feel the tug and trace it. And every time she pushed a lens through, she knew she might lose it for good, stranded in the void between bubbles. Yet in careful hands, it let her pierce the pirate station's networks, watching their traffic as if through a keyhole no one else even knew existed. Her mother had warned her never to use it recklessly. But watching the miners die of preventable sickness, Camila found herself hovering at that needle's edge more and more often. This time, Camila was prepared. Focused solely on the mining camp, she had redirected all her cameras to cover its expanding footprint. As the conversation unfolded, other rooms of the hospital materialized on her screen just in time. When the nurse ushered the doctor out of the examination room, Camila swiftly located them in the adjacent room.
Did you administer the vial?
The doctor inquired as they entered.
Yes, just as you instructed.
The nurse replied, her tone anxious.
But he succumbed regardless. It didn't work.
Frustration etched across his face. The doctor lamented the lack of adequate equipment. With a resounding thud, he pounded the table, venting his exasperation at the limitations imposed upon him.
Have you heard from Yodnat? How is he doing with that communication tower?
He queried. The nurse shook her head.
He's doing the best he can, but they have this place in a pretty tight lockdown.
So they would rather have all of us die here than expose their little pirate operation. Of course, we knew this. Still, we must keep doing all we can.
The doctor asserted. Meanwhile, Camila had tapped into the pirates' orbiting station, which was instrumental in running the operation. They were fully aware of the dire conditions on the planet. The doctor's suspicions were confirmed. These individuals had no intention of addressing the disease. If the slaves perished, they didn't bat an eye. It seemed they had a steady supply of human resources, with new slaves slated for delivery. Unable to bear witnessing the suffering any longer, Camila realized the hopelessness of the situation. The chances of this planet being rediscovered were slim, leaving the slaves with little hope of rescue. Unless I provide them with a working communication device, she resolved, her decision made in a heartbeat. She knew the journey was feasible. With her mother, she had observed Dinnick's young family for months as they traversed the desert and then the mountains, settling on the opposite end of the valley. However, Camila rarely directed her attention towards them, for two reasons. Firstly, she harbored resentment towards them and couldn't bear to witness their activities in the childhood valley from which she was now barred. Secondly, the ship had deemed the parents unsuitable, with Dinnick's fate to be determined at the age of 16. What have these three been up to? She pondered to herself, suddenly remembering them. Probably the same boring stuff as always, I bet. With that, she punched in the coordinates. As she awaited the connection to establish, she hurried to her room and feverishly packed her bags. The prospect of venturing beyond the valley was both thrilling and daunting, as she had never done so before. "What are you doing, darling?" She heard her mother's voice echo in her mind. "We can't risk them discovering this place, at least not while the pirates hold orbit. You need to let this go. They hold all the cards." Her mother's words gave her pause. After all, she had promised not to interfere, but could she neutralize the pirates' control without revealing herself? That was the question. Disabling the orbital station seemed like the solution. Her ship's prototype core gave her one forbidden option. She could needle a subspace thread directly into the station's lattice and push a lens through. The lens would act as a hidden relay, letting her slip commands into their system as if she were already inside. The danger was obvious. To create such a bridge, she would have to collapse the needle itself, burning the thread and almost certainly losing the lens to subspace. Worse, the backlash would wash through her consoles, feedback she might not survive if she miscalculated. Still, if she placed it correctly, the lens could sit unnoticed in the station's comms, waiting. The next time Yodnat tried to hack out, she could ride the opening, seize the channel, and tear down the pirates' lockdown from within. There had to be a way, she told herself, without exposing her presence too soon. With a sigh, she tossed her bag back into the wardrobe and raced through the ship, cancelling all other queries as she delved into her options regarding the pirate station. Only later, when Dinnick stumbled upon the ship's doorstep, did she recall that she had neglected to check in on the family that day. It took over a decade and numerous setbacks, but eventually, they managed to send out a distress beacon. Camilla's story is only a small flicker in Madane's long night. If you'd like to know what becomes of the valley, the pirates, or the secrets she kept, return, traveller. The dunes hold their breath for the next tale.